Hey wrappers, I wanted to make a video to talk about single ring finishes with woven wraps. Single ring finishes use sling rings to finish a carry where you would normally use either a double knot or a sliding knot, and uses a little bit less length. So sometimes it's good if you're trying to eke out a carry in a wrap that's just a little too short for the carry. Sling rings are specifically designed for baby wearing. You always want to make sure that you're using rings that are designed for this purpose because they are weight tested. They're tested for the metals used. It's going to be okay if like your baby chews on it, all that. And they are weight rated up to hundreds of pounds, so never going to break. They come in several sizes. These are all from Sling Rings out of the US. And there are different sources, but generally they kind of fit the same sizes. The smallest size being a 2-inch small ring, mediums being 2.5 inches in diameter, larges being 3 inches, and then extra larges 3.5 inches. And there's always this big question about what size ring you need. For most commercial woven wraps, in the range of about 220 GSM up above 300, sometimes up to 350 depending on the weave. Medium rings are what you're looking for. These are the 2.5-inch rings. Most commercial wraps can do a single ring finish with a medium ring. Not all. If you're getting these big, thick, carpety wraps that are 400 GSM, you might need a large sling ring. And if you use very thin wraps, you might need a small. I use DIY wraps. This one is Osnaburg, which is only 160 grams per square meter, very thin. So I have to use smalls, otherwise my ring finish will slip. As for how to thread a single ring finish, I'm just going to kind of wrap this around me to show you. There's two different ways you can go about this, and one is working from the tail ends, and one is creating a loop in the middle. I'm going to show you both. So if you're working from the tail ends, essentially what you're going to do is thread one tail through, and then you take your other tail and cross it on top. You take the vertical tail that's kind of running underneath everything and bring it back up through the ring. Pull this all the way through. And essentially what happens is you have this vertical tail running from over my shoulder, goes over the ring, under the other tail of the wrap, and then back over the ring. And then the horizontal tail coming across my body this way is going under the ring, over the other tail, and under the ring. So they cross in a little X through the ring. And then this, at this point, if you use the correct size ring, should hold secure. And on top of that, kind of like a sliding knot, you can also adjust it. The other way is to start in the middle of the tail and reach through the ring and pull the wrap in the middle here through the ring part way. So you end up with this little loop sticking up through the tail, like so. And then you thread the other tail through that loop. And then pull the loop tight. And that achieves the same thing, essentially. I did it in the opposite direction, which I'll talk about later. But again, secure, one tail going over, under, over, and the other going under, over, under, with the ring in the other tail. I've threaded this back the other way so that I can show you a few things. In order to make sure that a ring finish is secure, there's a couple things you want to do. One is to make sure that the tails, where they go through the ring, are not twisted. So the bottom rail should be the bottom rail on either side of the ring. Top rail. See my top rail here, it was folded all the way under. I want to kind of bring it back up to the top of the ring, like so. And over my shoulder, this tail, this rail is straight, and this rail is straight. And then on top of that, not just being twisted, you also kind of want to, especially with the one that's on top, finger walk it a little bit, kind of like you would through a ring sling, where basically you pop it up, stick your thumbs under the loop, and find both of the rails. So with this thumb, I'm going to find the bottom rail. With this thumb, I'm going to find the top rail. And then I'm just going to walk the whole width of the wrap from one thumb all the way across to my other thumb to make sure that it's not twisted and folded up on top of itself. And then you just kind of gently, strand by strand, tighten this to flatten it back out through the ring, so that you flatten it back out without retwisting it. And then the other thing on top of this is, if your ring finish is slipping, is you can see when I did this, the tail that comes horizontally across and goes over the other tail, it kind of pops up like a little hill from underneath the ring, which is nice when you're treating this like a sliding knot, because the tail that goes underneath the other tail can slide up and down easily like a sliding knot. But at a certain point you want it to stop sliding, and this little pop-up creates a nice little tunnel for this tail to slide through. So you want to close that tunnel back down, and basically what you want to do is just tighten both sides of the top tail, kind of strand by strand, because your goal is to make it lay flat. So now you can see that this tail that is running horizontally and going on top of the other tail is now running flat and kind of pushing the vertical tail down underneath the ring. If it's popped up like this, it's going to slide up and down really easily. But if you tighten it so that it lays flat, it no longer wants to slide. And once you have baby's weight on this, it will help keep that tension as well. And the other main thing with a ring finish is, because they're a little more fiddly, and unlike a double knot that has two knots adding to the security, and these can slide if you're not monitoring them, it's recommended to only use a ring finish somewhere where you can easily see it. So they're really popular for carries that tie near your shoulder like this. I wouldn't recommend them really for tying under baby's bum in the front where you can't really see it, or anywhere behind your back. But for a lot of carries that tie right at your front, they're really great. And the last thing I wanted to show you was what this looks like if you do end up using the wrong size ring. I can't show you what it looks like with too small a ring because my wraps use very small rings. But I can show you what it looks like with a little too big of a ring. So I'm going to do this with a medium ring and a large. So if I do this with a medium ring, you can see that the wrap does fairly well fill out the ring. There's no like extra space around it. But when I tighten this to flatten it back down, every time I'm pulling this tight, it's just kind of, slack is working its way back up into this. And no matter how much I tighten it, it just never quite holds securely. So this one's just a little bit too big. And I've used a medium ring with this wrap before, and it always felt like it was holding, but then the longer I wore it, it would just slowly sag. And then with a large ring, it's even more apparent. Where if you do your ring finish and you can actually see space in kind of the corners of the ring finish, you can tell this isn't secure at all. Like the tails just slide through. So obviously that's too large. So as a quick review, when you're doing a ring finish, you want to make sure you're using the right size ring so that the tails hold secure. You want to make sure the rails aren't twisted through the rings on both tails. You want to finger walk, especially the top tail, to make sure that the width is kind of evenly pleated through the rings and not bunched or twisted. And then you want to tighten it so that whatever tail's on top lays flat through the ring and isn't popped up like a little tunnel over top of the ring. And I hope that makes your ring finishes work that much better.